Good afternoon. I'm Marty Braden coming to you from Bountiful, Utah once again, and this is my channel where I share short 15-minute videos about the book I wrote in response to Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion, from my perspective as the Latter-day Saint. My book is called An Atheist Delusion, and this is part 22 of my review of the introduction to my book before I start my responses to each of the 10 chapters of Dawkins' book. We're getting close to finishing the introduction, so be patient with me. I promise we'll get it done soon. I closed off part 21 saying, if Joseph Smith was as ignorant and superstitious as his enemies said he was, then the mystical-oriented folks around him would have attracted to him greatly, and Joseph would have most certainly preyed upon his followers' superstitious fears. But instead, Joseph Smith taught doctrines that were absolutely free from any mysticism, all the while building a system of religion in which the invariable relation of cause and effect was and is its cornerstone. So let's go ahead and pick it up from where I left it off last. Richard Dawkins' end-all to be-all argument for each of the big questions about life and how it began, about the universe and how it began, about whether or not there is life after death, and if God does or doesn't exist, seems to be evolution and nothing but evolution, and its so-called crane of natural selection. All that Richard has learned about evolution combines together to form his reasons for disbelieving in God's existence. And so let me share a few more points from Joseph Fielding Smith's book, Man, His Origin and Destiny, to help me reaffirm my introduction as the foundation for my counter-arguments and very unique perspective on Richard's book, The God Delusion. As I quoted earlier, President Joseph Fielding Smith mentioned that Charles Darwin in his book, The Descent of Man, indulges in a rather difficult struggle to close the gap between the mental powers of man and those of the lower animals by quoting Mr. Darwin, who said, and I quote, "Man bears his bodily structure clear traces of his descent from lower forms, but it may be urged that as man differs so greatly in his mental powers from all other animals, there must be some error in this conclusion." And continuing on, he says, if no organic being excepting man has possessed any mental powers, as if his powers had been of a wholly different nature from those of the lower animals, then we should never have been able to convince ourselves that our high faculties have been gradually developed. So let me see if I understand this, Mr. Darwin. I guess because we supposedly convinced ourselves of this guess, it shows that we are not as smart as we think we are? Just kidding. Okay. We must also admit that there is a much wider interval in mental power between one of the lowest fishes, as a lamprey or lancelet, and one of the higher apes, Darwin says, than between an ape and a man. Yet this interval is filled up with by numberless gradations. End of quoting Dr. Charles Darwin, and now quoting Joseph Fielding Smith. After this introduction, this honorable gentleman, Mr. Darwin, who erroneously glories in the thought that he has an amoeba, or perhaps rather the larvae of existing ascidians, as very distant grandparents, laboriously endeavors to show that this great dividing gulf should not be considered as being beyond bridging in course of time. Quoting Darwin again from his book, The Descent of Man, these lower animals and man have certainly instincts in common, as it is. Oh my goodness. End of Darwin's quote. Now here's Joseph Fielding Smith continuing. Then he discourses on these instincts, which are enumerated as sexual love, the love of a mother for her newborn offspring, the desire possessed by the latter to suck, and so forth. I may ask myself, was this advocate of organic evolution unaware of the fact that it was written in the scriptures that the Lord created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind, and God saw that it was good? Likewise he brought forth cattle, and creeping things, and beasts of the earth after their kind, and that all of these were commanded to multiply and fill the earth. How could they do all of this and keep this commandment if they had not been endowed with these instincts in common with man from their beginning? Of course, it is natural for a mother to have love for their young, for the Lord endowed her with it. Otherwise, the poor little animal would starve to death if it did not have the common instinct to seek its food. In all of this, these lower animals are faithfully performing the commandment the Lord gave them to obey. Then The discourse goes on to enumerate other instincts, and with this I have no controversy with Darwin or with Dawkins, such as love, which the animals manifest. For all I know, animals may be able to count more than 4. At least they have the sense of distinguishing between 2, 3, and a herd. I freely admit that many of them, in their wild state, gather in flocks and herds, and it is possible that they have some social aim in doing so, as well as considering it a means of protection. As a member of Christ's church on earth, I do not take the view that animals have no reason and therefore cannot think. I would have you, my readers, this is me speaking now, check out the YouTube video Suda, S-U-D-A, the painting elephant, to consider what degree of intelligence and instinct God has given his animal creations. Continuing on with Joseph Fielding Smith. We have received divine knowledge, revelation, that each of these possesses a spirit in the likeness of its body. Some might also say that they have consciousness, or a degree of it. Each was created spiritually before it was created naturally and given a body for living on the earth. Naturally, then, there is some measure of intelligence in members of the animal kingdom. The fact remains, however, that they receive their place and their bounds by divine decree, which they cannot pass. I admit that many have a language or some power of communication, whether it be the elephant, the bear, the fox, the bee, the ant, the spider, or the bat. Just remember, though, that the amount or extent of their intelligence does not depend on the size of their brain. Judged by the performance, the lowly ant manifests greater intelligence than Mr. Darwin's highest ape. The busy bee can travel for many miles and knows where it is going and its way home. Bees are organized and live within communities and work harmoniously together, and so do ants. Some animals may have some sense of beauty, and Mr. Darwin is right in saying birds build nests without having previous instruction. The snake-like eel and the humble salmon follow the habits of their ancestors without having been taught. And this is more than man can do, that's for sure. The eel from the streams of England, Holland, and other places finds its way to the deep waters of the Galapagos Sea, and back again from whence it started, if I'm rightly informed. The salmon, for example, leaves the waters where it was spawned for a life in the sea, and then returns to the same stream from whence it left in its youth. It then comes home to spawn and then die. Is this intelligence? Some might call it instinct. I certainly believe it's a debatable question for sure, isn't it? I have to give attention to the fact that all kingdoms have a law given to them. Again, D&C 88, 36-38. All kingdoms have a law given. And number 37, and there are many kingdoms, for there is no space in which there is no kingdom. And there is no kingdom in which there is no space, either a greater or a lesser kingdom. And unto every kingdom is given a law, and unto every law there are certain bounds also and conditions. Man in the beginning was given laws pertaining to his or her being temporal as well as spiritual. So were the beasts, the fowl, the fish. All creatures were given laws and commandments which they cannot pass. Among these laws was the measure of intelligence which each possesses. And beyond the bounds of this decree they cannot go. Therefore the beast of the forest and the domesticated animal remains within the bounds divinely set at the beginning. Their measure of intelligence is fixed and limited. Not so with man, for he is the offspring of God and has been commanded to keep his commandments, with the promise that he may become perfect. Be perfect, I put in my notes, means become complete, even as the Father in heaven is complete, etc. Matthew 5:48 says, "Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father who is in heaven is perfect." I could go on and on, giving example after example of how we should marvel at the powers of the lower kingdom of animals that are greater than man's, such as the sense of smell of a bloodhound or the radar of bats. But for me, there is nothing in these acknowledgement that in the least gives evidence of any relationship between beast and man, genealogically speaking. Genealogically speaking, I love that. The Almighty has not placed the requirement or responsibility upon the animal world, beast, reptile, fowl, or fish, to bow down and worship him. He placed each in its sphere and gave it commandments commensurate with its purpose. They have been commanded to multiply, not to pray. They increase after their kind, not pay homage. And to these commandments they are true and faithful. These commandments, to believe in God, to obey his commandments, and to pray to him in the name of Jesus Christ, have been given to men and women everywhere throughout the world, in every dispensation of time, I might add. When men and nations have rebelled against his authority and commandments, they soon perish. We, the human family, have been commanded to be obedient and worship him, the creator of the earth and all things therein, and yet we find men and women, otherwise intelligent, in open rebellion and offering to him the greatest insult, denial of his existence, an atheist delusion. Men and women deny his fatherhood, his right to command and direct his creations, and in their open rebellion they choose to worship an amoeba, a fish, a reptile, a cow, a baboon, even gods made of their own hands, gods of wood, stone, gold, and the arm of the flesh, and place some of them in their own personal, ancestral, or genealogical tree. Yes, I, as someone who has faith in this supreme being, God the eternal Father, whose offspring we are, am willing to concede to the animals some measure of intelligence, but it is not intelligence gained over millions of years from iterations of mutations. It is intelligence given to us from God. In fact, I am happy in my belief that they have some mental powers, that they can think, that they may even have a sense of beauty, that they may exercise the spirit of pleasure and happiness. I'd invite you to watch a recent YouTube video called Two Chimpanzees Bathe a Dog, CCTV English. Such a fun video, where chimpanzees enjoy the pleasure of bathing a dog. They may become angry and remember a wrong committed against them, etc. All this, however, does not make them the offspring of God, nor does it indicate that the Almighty had nothing to do with their being in existence. It is too late to say anything that will do Mr. Darwin any good. He has gone where he has had the opportunity of learning of his folly, his delusion. But to others who are inclined to follow his lead, such as Mr. Dawkins, permit me to say that today, as just one example, we have the evidence that the Fuegians and the lower Bodocudos, see YouTube video titled With the Indians of Tierra del Fuego, are descendants of a once white and delightsome people, an intelligent people, who had the guidance of the Lord and his holy prophets among them. But because of their wickedness and rebellion against the living God, they were brought to the deplorable condition we now find them in. It's called the state of apostasy. The same conditions came upon many additional peoples because Satan came among them after they had been taught the faith in God and had been given his commandments. Satan and his minions told them, "Believe it not." And we are informed that men began from that time forth to be carnal, sensual, and devilish. Now, Mr. Darwin and his disciples like Mr. Dawkins speak glibly of the numberless gradations, all ranging from amoeba, worm, or other infinitesimal forms of life, up through the apes and higher apes, and then to man. They speak as though this gradation process has been proven as settled fact. It has not been proven. These evolutionists say that the whale, the shark, and other inhabitants of the deep, as well as all manner of life upon the land, have shown numberless gradations to the final state in which they find themselves today. However, when challenged to show the world these gradations, these intermediates, just one kind jumping over to a totally different kind, they fail to do so. And so it begs the question, if there have been these numberless gradations, then the missing links connecting us with the amoeba or worm all the way up to the higher apes should be filling and walking upon the earth today with all their various stages of their new kind. But there isn't any. There may be small mutations within each kind, meaning within the species of the specific kind, but never jumping over into a totally different kind. For example, a dog jumping over to a cat kind. All of them are in their finished, perfect form, just as God organized them when he said, "And it is good." It's not necessary for a specific brethren to search the deserts and the mountains and the depths of the sea trying to find these links which have never been produced. End of excerpts for President Joseph Fielding Smith on Man, His Origin, and Destiny. Anyone who has bought into this deception called evolution, which teaches man's ascent from ape to the upright human beings we are today, I would simply suggest that you invest the time it takes to watch the YouTube video called Genesis Impact, full movie. You will see why I feel comfortable in saying that most of this theory is indeed a scam, and in some cases, I am even persuaded to call it a lie. Watch the video and see if you agree or disagree with me. There is also the YouTube video titled, "You've Been Deceived," Dr. James Tour, where he exposes the false science behind origin of life research. I'm at the 15-minute mark, so I'm going to stop. This is such an incredibly important thing. Watch those two videos. Make your comments. Be brave. Be open-minded enough so your brain doesn't float up, but at least you could listen and watch and determine for yourself, are these scientists really on the mark? Make your comments, ask your questions. I'd love to look at it. I'll do my best to answer them. But until then, I wish you continued success. Goodbye.